Hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, watch a story chosen by a friend of mine and try to guess as I commentate along what their favourite thing about each episode might be.
Hey, hello Hadokelings. My name's Allan Lear and I'm sort of an improv comedian and generally just a friend of Toby's. And he's asked me to come along and have a word with you about one of my favourite episodes of Doctor Who for this new podcast that he's doing. Well, I didn't have to think twice about my choice. One of my absolute favourites is The Curse of Fenric.
We play the contest again. Happy Times and Places listeners, hello, it's time for the final part of The Curse of Fenric, which there was a rumour before it started that they were trying to get it extended to be a fifth episode. That was the word of mouth at the time, was that they shot so much material. So I think expectations were pretty high for this one already. I think there was a feeling that this was, a pretty epic kind of adventure. Even though Ian Briggs had written, well, Dragonfire had been the winner of the season poll that year. Dragonfire's had an interesting journey, hasn't it? Because I think it was the one that was felt to be most like traditional Doctor Who. Had a Nazi-like villain, and a monster in the ice and all of that sort of stuff. So I think we all, when we were desperate for new Doctor Who to be like old Doctor Who, it was the one that everyone gravitated towards as being the best because it was the most like old Doctor Who, and it certainly won the season poll, didn't it? Whereas now I think it's sort of dropped down a little bit because actually, what works best about season 24 is a lot of the stuff that we reacted against at the time because it was a tonal shift that seemed to go against what we sort of, Hinchcliffe and Holmes and Pertwee nostalgists, sort of wanted, which was, something that seemed a bit more sort of serious and gothic or at least action-packed and military. But actually now looking at season 24, I think Delta is probably the one that works the best because it mixes the sort of zany adventure, with fast-paced, fun, frothy, slightly crazy adventure. And Paradise Towers, I think, has ambitions to do something a little bit different. But I don't think anyone was necessarily thinking that the combination of somebody who'd written for season 24 and the director of Paradise Towers, which I think a lot of people felt that the execution was its problem. I think it's a bit more complicated than that. And nobody's wild about Mysterious Planet when talking about Trial of a Time Lord. So I think it's quite fun. I like the Crotons, so therefore I like the Mysterious Planet because it's essentially the same story. But I think we're all surprised at what was pulled out of the hat with this. But this isn't the penultimate episode, episode 4. It is the final episode, and I think I imagined all the sort of epic scenes that we were missing, and then actually when the special edition comes along, there's some good stuff in there. But I still love it. I still love the original 4 parts, and consider those the definitive versions, really. And I will watch the others as a curio, as an addition. But I think there's nothing to apologise for in these 4 episodes. And so I know everyone likes the "everything stops for tea" line, which I think is quite fun, but I don't think it's a huge loss. It's quite grim, isn't it? But anyway, listen up. Let us now watch episode 4 of The Curse of Fenric, and I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. Oh, yes, I have had time Corey Pullman. I'd looked her up the other week, and I wondered I couldn't remember why I'd looked her up the other week. I was thinking, Pullman. It's because she's the daughter of the actress Barbara Young, who died, as I record this, relatively recently, although probably relatively, I think Pink's Let This Party Started is a relatively recent song, and I discovered to my cost that there are probably people who are allowed to vote that were being born when it was being played on the radio. But so what I think of as recent, I think of this as recent, but I think she's died within the past 12 months. Barbara Young was the wife of Jack Pullman, who wrote I, Claudius. And I couldn't think of it. I was thinking, there aren't any famous, apart from, Corey Feldman. Corey Pullman, Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman is not the wife of Corey Feldman. Why would she be? Or Marty Feldman. Pullman, Feldman. Right, they're all related. Marty Feldman, Corey Feldman, and Corey Pullman are all in it. I don't know what they're doing. But anyway, Jack Pullman, who wrote I, Claudius, is Corey Pullman's father. So she is from a showbiz family, but I don't think she's acting anymore. She has done a few events recently, but I think she's good in this, and I think the Ace and her mother subplot is an interesting one. But here the story takes on another leap. I always think this episode, or this part of the episode, has a slightly different colour palette. It's like it's been graded slightly differently, but that might just be because of the signal when it was broadcast at my house and the copy that I had when I'd videoed it. But again, I love that this era does things like this a lot, where nothing really happens in this scene, but it's a mood scene, her singing to the baby, and it's a bit like the bit in Ghostlight where Catherine Sessinger just sings a song on the piano. That it's attempting to not just go, here's a series of storytelling scenes, but let's have some mood, let's have some character, and the speed at which all this moves, and that's great with the window smashing and the paper flying about, and this is really harsh. I love this. Shoot! He just comes in, shoot them, and he says, "What for?" And then he says, "Because I order you to." I mean, that everything. Bates is a good guy, but he can't disobey an order. But at least he does the kind of what for, And this is really grim. These are good guys. These are British soldiers doing as they're told. I like it. Let's just get this over with. I like Captain, and I quite like that Captain Bates starts to get a little bit more to do, because, as I say, he was an actor that seemed to be of the moment and playing a bit of a small part, all things considered. But it shows how Doctor Who was kind of upcasting in those days and attracting lots of good young talent and good young handsome talent. I have to say, it's quite a sexy cast, isn't it, of young people? I love this scene as well. I think the intensity with which Alfred Lynch does it, I don't understand why some people, and the lightning on his face, I love that. I think that's a brilliant scene. It's really unsettling, and it's giving it the sort of epic oomph, and it's showing Millington's plan coming to a head and him being totally kind of fixated on this ancient thing that is going to bring about the end of the world. Well done for moving in unison, ladies. And I love all of this. This stuff's very well done. All the battle stuff, and the rain, really gives it a kind of all hell's broken loose. The heavens have opened and all hell's broken loose. Do those things go together, or is that just me getting two metaphors and trying to make it sound like a plan? I think these poor girls must have absolutely frozen doing this. The fact that they're even vaguely vampiric, I think, is to their credit. Raymond Trickett, as the ancient team of all, had been a prison officer in EastEnders. When Den went to prison, I think there were 3 prison officers. There was Jeremy Young, Cal, Neil Dalgleish, Damon, from Arc of Infinity, and Raymond Trickett. Or maybe Raymond Trickett was a prison officer when somebody else had been to prison. But I don't know. I seem to remember all my EastEnders prison officers. But I've not seen him in much since. Dinsdale Landon does this wonderfully. Have I told the Dinsdale Landon story about... He does that really, really well. And don't interrupt me while I'm used. It's slightly comical, but that's okay. But I like the sort of blinking eyes thing he's got as well. And it may be partially just because he's got contact lenses in, but it's also a suggestion because he hasn't got Judson's glasses on anymore, and maybe the physical form that he's got, it's still, he might have mended the legs, but maybe he hasn't completely reconnected the retina, or maybe you can regenerate. You can overcome paralysis but not glaucoma. I don't know. It's just, I think it's a nice little touch. It's a reminder that this is not necessarily a stable vessel that he's in. I have to say it's. I mean, I quite like the fact that this deadly poison gas is so deadly that you can just put a bin on it and then do sort of funny dialogue while it's still in the room. But again, some of this is a sort of drama convention, and it's moving at a lick, and that's a great gag as well. I'd have stuck some dynamite under the desk at Uek, and again, I can't think of anyone better to be sort of throwing themselves around in the mud and the rain than the Seventh Doctor and Ace, because the two actors are so committed, and that's really important for sort of keeping up the pace and the energy. And sometimes videotaped drama can be a bit stilted, and if you've ever tried to make a drama on, I know they have slightly better quality equipment, but if you've ever tried to make anything on your own video cameras, it's making everything sort of flow is actually really hard, and keeping the pace and the energy, and when you're cutting from scene to scene without it sort of being jarring or being clunky or episodic, and the actors help with that. Here's another bit of kind of I like the way it actually cuts, just from the screen when you don't see anything. That's very effective. This is pretty grim, the chemical warfare. I mean, we're the good guys, and this is horrible. What are we doing? That's against the Geneva Convention, isn't it? And that brings another dimension to the story. That what are we? It ties back to that scene in episode 2. What are we prepared to do? And of course, conventions in warfare seems very oxymoronic, but it's stuff that's worth considering, especially in something that I find very appealing, gung-ho, boys' own action-adventure type of stuff. It behoves us to have an element that goes, as the Third Doctor said to Codell, amongst all the stories of bravery, don't glorify it. It's pretty grim. And I love all of this. This is all and then I'll ruin that by going, I love the bit where they cock their guns and go off to be brave. And yes, and I love the fact that Captain Bates gets his bit, because he's sort of been on the periphery, and as I say, he was an actor that I was quite interested in, and then you get that bit where the back of his head comes into shot, and this is his sort of hero moment, and I like that I always like it when a sort of a peripheral character suddenly gets a bit where they get to sort of take center stage, or just do their little bit that helps to chip the story towards victory, where people either change sides or have a change of heart, or dig deep to do something that you wouldn't expect them to do. That's those are the moments to me that make adventure stories, and that sort of make things like Doctor Who more so than things that it can't do, like big spaceship battles and that sort of thing. It relies on the humanity and the people and all of that. I like that as well. I bought it cheap in the market, and I remember I did manage to get hold of a few Russian military badges, because I went to Russia with the school. There was a school trip to Russia, and I don't know if I got the badges there. I think people did on the streets. You'd give them your Western gloves for military badge. And it was quite humbling. I think I talked about that in the first episode. I mean, again, and here's another example of that. I shall duck down, and you shall crowd over me. It's I mean, that's the third time that's happened in this story. And as I say, it is a sort of, but it made it, and you can read it as going, well, he was so mesmerized by these, vampire medusoid type, these creatures that have sort of paralyzed him with fear, but it never quite works, that paralyzed fear, because you just end up looking stupid. It always looks more convincing if somebody tries to make a bolt for it and is sort of grabbed and killed, but it's so hard to do with videotape drama and again in a set you can't remove walls from and all of that sort of stuff. I think maybe they could have done with that, but they wouldn't have had the time. This, however, is great because it has I mean, we still have the I'm ducking down and you're just leaving, but they go, let's have Judson. I love the fact that Fenric, who's this evil creature from the Torn of Time, kind of goes, and I've killed this guy and I'm inhabiting his body, but for him, I'm going to kill this woman who's patronized him for the past God knows how long. And it's and it's grim because everyone starts dying. Nurse Crane's a sort of peripheral character, which is extraordinary to think of. Anne Reid, isn't it? Whose career has gone through the roof since then. And I mean, she'd always been around, but actors are and had done good work and had done notable work, but was still, when Doctor Who approaches her and goes, it's only a few lines here and there, it goes, well, yeah, I'll do it, which I don't think she would do now. She was the sort of guest lead when she returned to Doctor Who in Smith and Jones, so that's always nice. That's why all actors carry on, you see, because there's always that hope. You go, I still haven't made it at 50, but you go, yeah, but I could play Falstaff at 70. It's the hope that's the killer, really. But Fenric sort of going, yeah, I'm gonna toy. It's really sadistic, actually, the death of Nurse Crane, and then when it cuts to that sort of malevolent Cheshire Cat smile at the end, that's absolutely terrific. And this is all great, the smashing of the wind. I love all of that under anything that's got a sort of under siege element. We batten down the hatchets, and hammer planks to the windows because they can't get in, and then when they do get in, and you go, right, we've got to just run for it now. That the sanctuary is gone now, and I've never minded this, that she only knows one address in London at this time, which is her nan's address. She knows where her nan lived in the war. I can totally believe that. She might have read letters or whatever. It does rely on a bit of a coincidence, but it doesn't offend me, this. I think partially because there might be a suggestion that a lot of this stuff's been manipulated by Fenric in time and whatever. But I think it's actually pleasing thematically. It works for those characters, and unfortunately, we knew Jean and Phyllis were going to die because this had been done on the bane of Doctor Who, Open Air. Was it Open Air? No, Fast Forward. It was one of those. Was it? Gosh, I think it was presented by Philip Schofield, the presenter who dare not speak his name as I currently record this. They showed a sort of special effects behind the scenes going, and this is the scene where Jean and Phyllis die. So I think from the minute they came into it, I was waiting for Jean and Phyllis to die. And I remember when episode 3 finished and they still weren't dead, it was like, oh, they've given away something from episode 4. That weather looks vile, and it's really good because it really adds to it. And sometimes sort of grey weather can make an effect. I never think the Stones of Blood really benefits from the sort of grey drabness of that videotape, but I think the greyness here really sort of adds to it. Jean and Phyllis's death being revealed on that program, it did seem a sort of a spoiler too early. But of course, you have to get your show in the papers. So not in the papers, you have to, in the pre-publicity. But I don't think we'd do that now. Although that said, we did have the human Dalek on that. Anyway, it's poor old Commander Millington. The story sort of doesn't know what to do with him now. He just keeps sort of running into the room of the Ultima Machine and seeing who's there to shoot, and then running out again. And the fact that he didn't finish Vershinin off, you sort of goes a little bit careless, but he is a bit barking, and that death is not a great death for the character of Millington, but the story sort of moved on beyond him, and now we have the bromance between Captain Bates and Vershinin, and that Vershinin's sort of moment of killing Millington is pretty cool, but I do. And I'm sad that Big Finish. Oh, actually, hang on. Let's pause to praise Dinsdale Landon here. He's done a terrific job. I still don't think I've told you my Dinsdale Landon story, have I? I keep starting to tell it. I might have told it in episode 1, which I did a while ago, because there's been a gap between episode 1 and these 3. But I like the Bates and Vershinin thing, and I do think there's definitely a spin-off series in Captain Bates and Vershinin, being bravely adventurous and not quite having the courage to declare their love for each other, and eventually, perhaps being, gay icons, as they learn that, as they fought against Fenric in the war, they can fight against the expectations of society in the late 40s and early 50s. But Dinsdale Landon does that bit where he can't think of the solution brilliantly. Bates, when their hair's wet, when his hair's wet, Bates does look a bit 80s there. But they are a handsome couple, aren't they? I'm sure there are other podcasters, Joe Ford, who might be able to sort of describe the vibe of Bateson version in more than cishet white guy, cishet Hadoke. And this is and I like this because they've dropped the English thing, early, going, we have to speak English for the mission, and so that the viewers home can understand us. But they've sort of emphasised that and made it part of those opening scenes, and it comes back to bite Sorin in the arse. It's like, oh no, the whole English thing. That's because you are English, because you are part of this, and that look that Landon gives is absolutely brilliant. And I'm so sad. Workers of the world unite, and yes, do you want to go to heaven? I'm so sad that Captain Sorin dies. I think that's really sad and horrible, because I wanted him to be, I suppose I kind of knew that he was never gonna, because him and Ace had this thing. I just thought they might sadly wave each other off at the end. And it's funny again, isn't it, that because they've rightly and brilliantly cast, I think Tomek Bork is Polish, isn't he? But an actor with a genuine accent and the language, it means we now have, an Eastern European, Russian sounding whatever, Fenric, which. Because of course that's the actor's accent, and again it's moving away from going all monsters have to speak RP, but it did feel slightly dissonant at the time, because you're going, oh, it's a shame, because the actor can't do a RP, it means it's a compromise. But of course, no, it's fine. What if an actor, an ancient alien god in the body of a Russian soldier can have a Russian accent in the same way that in the body of a classically trained Dinsdale Landon, it sounds like the classically trained Dinsdale Landon. Why is one right and why is one not? I only mention it because of the things that seemed to not like the Cockney vampires, and it's sort of my own snobbishness and our own assumptions about what people should sound like on television, and things have changed since. And actually, one of the more refreshing things about New Who is there is a much bigger array of voices and accents, and it gives it much more verisimilitude. Much as I actually do like the RP, enunciation, slightly theatrical aspect to the acting and performances of 50s, 60s, and 70s television. It's all different, isn't it? And it's all good in its own way and in different ways, and I love it all. And just because one is different from the other, it doesn't mean you can't like both. This is really cool. I remember my music and drama teacher, Mr. Knight, saying Doctor Who was really harsh last night, that the idea of the Doctor calling his companion an emotional cripple, he thought was really tricky and difficult television, and he thought that was an extraordinary thing for a program to be. It was interesting because that hadn't struck me at the time as being unusual. I think there were quite mature conversations that went on in House Hadoke when I was younger, when I was youngest of four, and my mum's quite a sort of blunt woman and a woman of the medical profession, and so sort of language like that we didn't strike me as particularly harsh or unnecessary. But I think he felt that in a young person's drama, that very concept of being and the phraseology. Now the phraseology is now slightly different as well, because the word cripple is one that you wouldn't really use because of its echoes to disability and all other stuff. But the way that the Doctor is manipulating the situation, this is really brave stuff to do with, especially with this most sort of clownish of all Doctors, to make it. Now we know he's only doing it because he says later, to make her lose oh, that's really that's really horrible. That actually got me. It's it is a slightly because of the blocking of it and everything. The fall to the floor is a slightly theatrical thing, but actually the force of the emotion and the concept of what the Doctor doing is pretty intense and grim stuff. Well done, Doctor Who. These are bold areas to be going. But I am sad for Captain Sorin. And the Doctor has had to make some pretty harsh choices in order to get to the end of this. I mean, there's no great big there are explosions, but it's ended by people talking in a room. But the addition of fire and explosion. Look at that. I mean, they've just kept it up. They must be absolutely soaked and miserable, and you can't do that in more than one take. I find that wow. I've got quite emotional at that, because I'm having to talk about it as well. But just thinking of the sort of emotional impact that what the Doctor has done on Ace there, and what your parental or loved figure can do, the cruelty that they can dispense, and of course the Doctor has done that for the greater good, but the ends justify the means. I mean, what she's been through there, I think is, and Sophie Aldred does it very well. But bravo, Doctor Who, because I think that's, and as I say, I was much more interested in the explosions and the vampires and all of that at the time, and especially maybe because Ace was a girl, and so I wasn't that bothered. But actually, I think that's really struck me this time of where they're going, their ambition for what to do with the companion, the maturity and the complexity of what they're doing with the Doctor's treatment of Ace there. I think is exceptional. And God bless Sophie Aldred. I mean, diving in there, it looks like there's loads of rocks that you could scratch yourself on, but also really bloody cold, and diving. Just she's so game. She's such an asset to the show in terms of what she brings to it in terms of energy and all of that sort of thing. I sometimes don't think the line readings are great, but I think she. I think both of them have that sometimes with their line readings, but in terms of their energy and their bond and their commitment, they're a real pair, these two. And I've learnt to love them a lot more than I did as a kid, I have to say. And I think that's because I appreciate what they're bringing rather than worrying about. I used to get really fed up with Ace's modern slang stuff and the professor joke, and I used to get cross with Sylvester because of the gurning and the spitting when it should be sort of dramatic, but again, you sort of cast off a lot of that and appreciate them for what they bring, which is all those things I said, the bond, the energy, the commitment, the physicality, and as I say, what the boldness with which the scripting and the script editor, I presume, I'll talk to him about it very, very shortly, of having quite a sort of mature take on what we're doing to the companion, and what, how these travels in time are affecting them, not just in terms of adventure, but sort of at a deeper level, and sort of, and how that then is reflected metaphorically in the subject matter of the storylines. It's that's ambitious, that's bright, that's smart, and that's bold, and that's I think above and beyond the call of duty for what this programme was at the time and how it was seen at the time, and even what I wanted from it. I appreciate that much more now, that particular aspect, to the extent that I think I was going to go, oh, my favourite thing of episode 4 is the Bates and Vashinin, Bates's little subplotty bit, or I love that bit of Millington, battlefield shall stretch 100 leagues. I love Dinsdale Landon's performance as Judson / Fenric. I think, by the way, the chess game stuff is rubbish. It's almost like, it's the sort of MacGuffin. How do I solve this chess puzzle? Well, I don't play by the rules of chess. Well, you can't do that. That's not how you solve a logic puzzle. You go, if a train traveling there is going that far and a train traveling there is going that far, how come this train gets there first? Because they get off the train and get an aeroplane. You can't just suddenly bring something in from elsewhere. How do you solve this chess puzzle? You do it by not adhering to the rules of chess. So that is a load of old nonsense, but it doesn't really matter because it gives us that lovely bit with the workers of the world unite and all of that, which when you're a young kid who's being all political, you're going, oh yeah, cool, Doctor Who, well done, they've done an anti-nuclear story and now they're workers of the world are uniting, and isn't that all cool? So I loved all of that, but also it gives those peripheral characters their moment to shine, which when Doctor Who always does that, I'm always grateful. I love it in Russell T Davies stories where the humble people on the shop floor all get together to do a bit that, helps Doctor Who or overcomes a baddie. I've just been watching Torchful Children of Earth, and I love it when the Welsh people on their housing estate all start rocking the car of the people keeping Yanto's sister under surveillance so that she can make an escape. I love it like that, when it just sort of shows we can all, even people that we'd write off or were slightly ne'er-do-wells, we've all got it in us to do a heroic bit, and it can be quite fun. And I love all of that. I love it when it shows that when everyone's important and everyone can do a good thing and everyone can find something in themselves to help out a Doctor Who story. I love that. So yeah, it's fine. It's a MacGuffin, isn't it? But I love the Curse of Fenric. But I feel duty bound to point out that it's the solution to the chess problem. And also, I have to say, the battle between two creatures from the dawn of time that involves vast death and cataclysms and the heavens opening and dangerous undercurrents and the rise of the vampires is all because he's set him he's sort of gone, if a man is found in or who am I? Yes, who am I? I'm born on Tuesday, woken on Wednesday. It's just one of those sort of it's a sort of hoary old puzzle that you'd have thought was clever when you were sort of 8, and you sort of go, and that's how the Doctor has trapped Fenric. He's sort of set him it does seem a little bit sort of prosaic, but then again, one of the things I love about Doctor Who is its juxtaposition of the highfalutin and the otherworldly and the deep and meaningful and the universal with something as mundane as a police box, or a kid in a gas mask and all that. But I do think there is something pathetic, about the fact that the whole reason this great big time being is in change is because it couldn't work out a logic puzzle with a chess set. But I do like that speech skit saying he pulled bones out of the sand and carved them into chess pieces. I love all of that. That's all quite mythical and nice. And the Doctor having chess pieces that he's made of bones, I think, is all adds to that atmosphere. But then they've just got a sort of army chess set, and I don't think it bears thinking about too much. But anyway, that's fine. So I feel it's been said to me a couple of times, in accentuating the positive, you sometimes, you can still acknowledge some of the weaknesses, and I do think that's really silly. But the commitment of everybody to everything means it sort of gets away with it, and is fine. It's not really what it's about. It's the conduit to tell the story of those characters that we meet and the relationship between Ace and the Doctor, all of which is fantastically done. And so surprisingly to me, despite all of the sort of stuff I like about the story and the setting and those characters, and I'm always much more interested really in the new people we meet in a Doctor Who story than I am about the Doctor and the companion. I always tend to think of them as a conduit. I don't want my heroes to sort of to cry or have something that they're going to hold over too many episodes, because I want you to take me to a new world and us immerse ourselves in this new and exciting place, not have your the things that you've been dragging, your emotional baggage, if you like, that you've been dragging around with you. As much, that's the stuff that interests me less, although I can understand its importance, and actually it's what's made the new series work. And so actually a lot of what I do like about the new series is that continuity stuff that means that when that comes to a head at the end of the season, it's a big oomph. So it's interesting, isn't it, how one can think one doesn't go for a thing, and then that thing actually really speaks to one when it's done by different people or is in a different guise. But anyway, maybe it's because of that. Maybe it's because I've been really enjoying the new series, and since The Curse of Fenric was on in 1989, Doctor Who has sort of developed, but it has developed as I've said before, it could, the Cartmel era can perhaps credit itself with going, well, we did start the ball rolling with some of that stuff, and I'm not saying that Russell T Davies, who is what I really need to do is pick up from some of the thematic and character development style of the show that was so successful it was axed and everybody thought was rubbish. But it just seems to be that if you want to see patterns in Doctor Who, I think that's a reasonable one to see, that there is that it's not like it's a totally different show despite the the decades apart, and that's quite pleasing actually, that that the chain still has a link in it, even though it's it's perhaps one that's been sort of quite stretched. It hasn't entirely shattered. But that means that watching that this time, I did get a sort of lump in my throat when Ace, when Ace's faith in the Doctor was destroyed, and it was more because of what I knew that was doing to her. That's a horrible thing to feel. I've had incidents in my life, and I sort of say that they're a bit like. They make you like a broken vase, again, sort of appropriate to the Curse of Fenric. You're shattered and you can be glued together, but you'll never quite hold water again, no matter how much you keep trying to pour it in as you continue the rest of your life. And I think that those scars that Ace Ace carries with her from her. From the life that has been hinted at has been difficult and dangerous, and you can read subtext into what sort of things she might have gone through as a kid, and what her teenage years have done to her, and then having that having the Doctor be a sort of safe haven, and have then him deliberately, almost malevolently sever that again, as we discover, for the greater good. But that that hurts, as well as in a story where she's met this nice guy who's turned out to be killed by an ancient chess playing time beast, and she's also changing and developing herself, and that's all tied in with the nature. I love all of that. I've been watching The White Lotus recently, where the sea and the environment ties us in with the ancient times, and there is something about the elements there, which is why the rain and the water and the mud and all of that stuff grounds the story in the earth. And that, again, like vampires, like old things, are quite terrifying, because they remind us that we're just a very short blip on this earth, and that people who are as alive and vital as we were only 100 years ago are all anyone that was my age 100 years ago, or even 18, my age when I watched this 100 years ago, when I so young and the whole world was ahead of me, and everything I could feel and smell and taste and touch everything, and life was surreal to me. All of that's gone in 100 years' time. Not only gone, dust, nothing to show for it. Which I think and there's something about tying stuff up with the earth and the elements that therefore is, again, rather scary and rather terrifying, and it makes things feel big and epic at the same time as making us feel small and vulnerable, but also tied in with nature, because and Ace's burgeoning sensuality and all that sort of thing is tied in with the invigoration of the water, and the clashing of the elements, and the powerful movements of cumulus and stratospheres and all of that sort of stuff. I think all of that stuff is really interesting. And so my favourite bit of episode 4 is the emotional severing of the Doctor, and her cleansing herself with by diving in at the end, which was not stuff that I have to say was my headline news at all when I watched and rewatched this story when it first went out. So well done, the passage of time, and well done this process, which has enabled me to think it. And my favourite thing overall, well, I mean, Nick Mallet as a director deserves an awful lot of credit. Ian Briggs as a scriptwriter deserves an awful lot of credit. I mean, both of those, I think, deserve a vote. But I can only choose one thing, can't I? And Marquez's music, Andrew Cartmel's script editor. You know, this is very much his vision, one of his visions of the show, or it ties in with his multi-vision of the show. But I'm going to have to be personal. I love the cast for this story. I think they're all excellent. You know, it would be too much just to choose Landon, who's brilliant, Lynch, who's brilliant. But I even like, you know, what Stephen Rimkus does and Marek Anton does with the smaller parts. Nicholas Parsons is amazing, and what a revelation. And I loved Captain Sorin. He was such a favourite character of mine, and I love the fact that all the Russians, you know, were played by actors using their genuine accents, you know, the principal ones anyway. It just felt real. So I'm going to choose the cast. It's a very lazy one, but because, you know, actors are my thing and acting is my thing. But I didn't choose any of the cast in episodes 1 to 4. But I feel Briggs and Mallet both lose out there, because if this had been 5 episodes or 6 episodes, I think both of them, and it's not often I choose the writer, and it's not often I choose the director, and it has to be special circumstances for me to do, because I just think that's a bit too all-encompassing and a bit too, and I like to acknowledge them, of course, and perhaps wrap them up with the things that I choose. But I think perhaps if this had been 6 parts, my 5th thing would have been the writer, my 6th would have been the director. But because I've only got 1 left to go, I'm going to choose the cast. Let's see what Alan chooses as his 4th thing and his bonus.
And fourthly, what do I like about the 4th episode? It's the way it reveals that this series of Doctor Who has got an arc plot. Now, we're used to that these days, but in classic Doctor Who, it's exceptionally rare for there to be an arc plot. It was done sometimes. You know, you had the Black Guardian trilogy, or you had the Key to Time, which is an arc plot, because the whole series is one story told in various different vignettes. But yeah, the arc plot with Lady Painfort and Ace saving her own future and all that sort of thing. So that people credit Babylon 5 with inventing the arc plot, but this is Doctor Who doing it 4 years previously and better. So there we go. And I have a bonus thing that I love about the story, and that has got to be the cast. It's exceptional, and there's great strength in depth in this cast as well. You know, from Nicholas Parsons, stunt cast as the whiskey priest who's ripped off from Stephen King's Salem's Lot, and does I still think a really good performance in that role. And then you've got Dinsdale Landon is brilliant as the Alan Turing character. Sylvester McCoy is really getting a handle on the character here, and here in Remembrance of the Daleks, his best performances, I think. And Sophie Aldred's Ace is multi-dimensional to a degree that she's never been before in the series, I think. So yeah, and you get a young Anne Reid, of course, as well, who comes full circle with us to get back as a hemivore in a later episode. So there you go, a little slide dig there as well from Russell T Davies, I think. So those are the things I love about Curse of Fenric. There are more, but those are the ones I've highlighted for this particular podcast. I hope you agree with me, even if it's not one of your favourites, that it's a very effective gothic horror episode series of Doctor Who with some very nice production values, unusually for the time. And it says here, finally, shamelessly plug anything I have coming up, and that is going to be a weekly podcast with Tony Slattery and a good friend of mine, Alex Leam, and Paul Carmichael, who's a Shakespearean actor. So that's going to be on Fridays, and if you want to watch out for it, head to Twitter, and it's @Slattery Podcast, all one word. Thanks for listening to my ramblings. Now for Toby's. Bye-bye.
Alan is a good man. I've a lot to thank Alan for that I won't do publicly, but he's helped me out big time with an issue or two that I needed help with, and so I'm grateful to Alan, and it's good to see him there. I don't see him and Erica often enough, even though they're only in Liverpool. Good friends both. It reminds Anne Reid, of course, in Smith and Jones, she's playing somebody who sucks blood through a straw. Of course she is. I was thinking of Anthony Carf the other day because he's in Empress of Mars, and of course he's in The Visitation. But he's in A Big Finish, and the Big Finish he's in is an Ice Warrior story. Now, as just a complete coincidence, there's no way they were going, we need to cast somebody who's also been in a Doctor Who audio that has the Ice Warriors. It's just how funny that he ended up being, popping into a casting director's head when they were thinking of somebody to be in an Ice Warrior story. No reason for that to happen apart from, and I'm sure the Anne Reid thing is just a massive coincidence. Anne Reid was prime plum casting. She's a movie star and a highly respected actress, and would be a headline-grabbing guest lead in any Doctor Who story these days. But I think it's just a lovely coincidence that she is in one where she's a bloodsucker, but with a straw rather than with breakable fingernails. Anyway, I've got to set up a meeting with the script editor of this story, who I'm going to interview about all 4 episodes of The Curse of Fenric, and let's see what he chooses as his favourite things. So we'll jump forward in time to Andrew Cartmel, and to have a little bonus, because, by the way, I got the cast. My bonus thing, I got the cast. 1 out of 5. Ain't bad. I'll take it. And put that in your flip-flop thingy. And let's see if Andrew is more simpatico with my choices or Alan's choices as we get to the final hurdle and shatter the final of Fenric's chains. And then for the final episode, I quite shocked myself, because as a stroppy teenage boy, I wasn't really interested in girls being sad and that sort of thing. And maybe it's because I'm getting older and stuff. And I remember my school teacher, my drama teacher, I mentioned this in the commentary, said, I watched Doctor Who last night. He used the phrase emotional cripple. That's really hard stuff. And I have to say, watching it as an adult now, and as somebody that's, been through emotional things and seen kids having emotional traumas, I have to applaud you for telling a Doctor Who story that's exciting and about Norse mythology and World War II and all that stuff we talked about and vampires. But you've got a really lofty ambition at the center of it, which is to talk about damaged youth and to use some of that not only as a theme for character development, but also as a metaphor with the bubbling water and the undercurrents and all of that. So it's not working just as a character thing, it's working thematically, and it's also working in Doctor Who, which is unusual. And I'd not really be bothered about that as a teenage boy. And watching it again today, I was very mightily impressed with the ambition to do that, and the fact that you pulled it off so well, and that she did it so well too.
Well, thinking of symbolism and of subtext, I've just clocked that the 2 writers who really did that brilliantly on Doctor Who in my tenure were Ian Briggs and Rona Munro, because that happens in Survival too. You've got this fantastic poetic metaphorical approach to talking about sexuality, for instance. And this is sort of what Ian Briggs is doing too. And I'm really quite proud of both those writers. They're extraordinary writers. The emotional cripple, is that when the Doctor is trying to elicit a response from Ace?
Yeah, he deliberately manipulates her into losing her faith in him. Yeah. So the ends are justifying the means, but it's she still has to go through it for real.
Yeah, and I'm quite proud of that. And of course, another thing that we were doing in this was enriching the character of Ace and expanding her backstory, which is because Ace is largely the creation of Ian Briggs. Certainly the fact that she's such a great character, it stems from the fact that Briggs was the first one to write her and to create the phase space of her, so to speak, giving her such a rich background. Yeah, so you went to town on that. Is episode 4 also the one where she vamps the guard on the door?
No, that's episode 3.
That would have been my favorite thing from episode 3, because doesn't she have some kind of relatively speech about being as fast as the hands on a clock or something?
Well, no, the poor guard has to do that line, which I have to say I think he struggles with a little bit, where he sort of goes faster than the second hand on a watch, and it's
so brilliantly written, but perhaps not quite. He didn't quite have the time to deliver it in the comprehending way it needed.
It doesn't quite have. I don't think it quite has the the undercurrents that it needs, perhaps, in the delivery. Although she's working her socks off, she does a great job.
Yeah.
But it's now according to this, we've got 2 minutes left. So
right, get cracking.
Let's get cracking. So, well, thank you, Andrew. Final thoughts, positive, because this is a positive podcast. We both love The Curse of Fenric. We want you to love it. And I hope you think it sort of stands the test of time, because I think it's up there with the greatest of all Doctor Who's.
Well, I do love it, and I especially love Ian, because without Ian Briggs' genius, this would have had none of the enormous richness that it does. And I'm very proud of it.
Good. Well, because neither of us actually, we both mention him a lot, but neither of us actually singled him out. So I feel it's right that you've come on to give him the name check that he deserves. And also,
I'm gonna have to give him an earful about Chekhov.
Well, and you're a busy man, and thanks for your time doing this silly little.
My pleasure. Lovely to see you,
podcast from the corner. And you, what are you up to? Well, you've got a minute to plug what you're up to, so that listeners can avail themselves of it.
Okay, this book has just come out. It's the first in a series about a character called the Paperback Sleuth. It's really good. I've literally just finished the sequel. I've just finished writing the sequel, which will be out probably in about a year's time. Meanwhile, I'm writing the sequel to this, which is my other crime novel series, which is The Final Detective. So I'm spending the rest of my summer. This summer, what I did this summer was writing another Vinyl Detective. So those are my two series of crime novels. Please borrow them from your library, or buy a copy, or listen to the audiobooks, or get the ebooks. Do please check them out. If you live in London, come to my next play. I don't know when it's going to be on, but it will be on at some point. Please come along to that, my stage play.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Andrew. And you don't need to give your time to this. And it's brilliant that you're still producing fine work and enjoying it.
One last Doctor Who related plug. I have written a book about Doctor Who called Script Doctor, which is worth seeking. If you're a Seventh Doctor fan, it's really worth seeking out.
Yep, I have it. It's great. And that will have some of the answers to the questions I didn't ask. Well, Andrew, before we get cut off, I'm going to say thanks, mate. Great to see you.
A pleasure. Thanks a lot, Toby.
Well, how fortunate were we to have Andrew as our guide and as a little coda to the normal shenanigans between me and a guest, in this case, Allan Lear. So I'm grateful to both Allan and to Andrew Cartmel, and I hope you've enjoyed revisiting one of Doctor Who's undoubted classics with me here in Happy Times and Places, and I hope to speak to you again soon, perhaps in an extended special edition where we do this all over again, but occasionally everything stops for tea. Thanks ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest this time around, who was Allan Lear. I'm grateful to him and, of course, to Andrew Cartmel, who joined us at the end there to give his thoughts on a story that he contributed so much to the success of. Thanks to both those gents, and of course to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, David Trainier, Steve Walker, Sarah Crotzer, P. Baker, Jim Mooney, Andrew Jolly, David James Wilson, Jim Mooney. I've said Jim Mooney twice. Dale Smith, Oliver Crocker, Peter Greaves, David Smith, Sean Reynolds, Giles Smith and Ian Smith. The music was by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out twice in the case of Jim Mooney, I don't know how that happened, Jim. Anyway, there we go. I got a message from him today giving his permission to mention his name. I always check because some people like to be anonymous benefactors. Oh yeah. Oh, you do. Oh, if I told you about the anonymous, but I think there's just two people who'd rather not have their patronage made public, and that's perfectly fair enough. Their financial affairs are their own. But anyway, yes, Jim dropped me a line today, just giving the thumbs up because I always check. But that's not why I read you twice, Jim. I'm reading you extra times. Like, Jim, you're all over the place, Jim. You're like the Curse of Fenric. There's the original Jim Mooney, then there's the extended Jim Mooney, then there's this is the movie version, the director's cut, Jim Mooney. That's a much longer version. I'm going to split you into 5 episodes as well, Jim. So Jim Mooney. I could anyway. The long and the short of it is, you normally just get your name read out once every now and again. The frequency depends on what tier you are on. It's one of the few points of difference on the Patreon, is that the higher up the tiers you go, the more often you get mentioned in the credits. Because in terms of actual product and broadcast material and stuff like that, everybody gets access to the same stuff, no matter what tier you are on patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. The tiers start at £3 per month, and that gets you everything of any consequence. But as you ascend up the tiers, there are little things like more frequent mentions and the odd badge here and there that lure you up the tiers. But mostly it's a pretty egalitarian system, and everybody gets pretty much everything, and everything is bonus releases, advanced releases, monthly AMAs, pictures of my dog. And it's all there at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. If you would like to help me to keep these things ad-free and to justify the time I spend doing them, and I mean that time is justified just by the fact that you guys listen to this. So thank you, whether you are a patron or not. But the option is there. The option is also there to go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke if you want to buy me a virtual coffee and support the arts in that way, because that's what this is. It's the arts. This is the arts, god damn it. I'm wearing a tie. I am wearing a tie as I do this. So those are the 2 ways that you can support financially. I totally get in these lean and hungry times that is not always possible, but what you can do that costs you nothing but a little of your time is to go to iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, all the places where you can leave reviews and say a few nice sentences, and crucially give 5 stars to these podcasts, and that really helps to separate us from the crowd. It enables us to be a bit more visible, and if you like and subscribe and do all that sort of thing, it really tweaks our algorithms so they can rise majestically like the Ancient One from the depths. What's also fun to do is to follow me on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts, and I have a Facebook page, a comedian page. Don't go on my personal thing. I've got too many friends, in inverted commas. I met about 4 of them, and in the process of offloading everything off that, so I've just got a personal private page, and the comedian page. It's still me. I don't have people, but it just means that I can just put all the work stuff on there. So if you like, and do you subscribe to that? I don't know what you do. Follow me or whatever. It's a black and white shot of me in a hat, looking apologetic. That's the vibe I tend to go for, even professionally. So do all those things. That'd be grateful. Always nice to connect with people online, and your support is always very much appreciated. And thanks for. I've actually signed off. This is the post credits. This is just the pluggage. Follow my social media and come to my comedy club in Manchester, XS Malarkey. That's every Tuesday at 8 p.m. It's always nice to see listeners of the podcast there, seeing me do the day job, which is being funny, hopefully, without always mentioning Doctor Who. I know, who'd have thunk it? Though I did mention Doctor Who about 3 times tonight. I've just come back from a gig, and it was lovely. So I just spend my entire life talking to people. Sometimes they're in the room, and sometimes, like now, they're not. But when you are in the room and listening to this, hello, I hope you've had a nice time. I'm going to stop talking now, because I think I've done too much of it.
And thank you for letting me be half an hour late. It was still mouse-related stuff, because the mouse had moved into a cupboard I had a cupboard full of food, which you don't want to have if you've got a mouse in the house. Nice. So the other day, I actually caught the mouse in a humane trap, took it off into the woods, released it in the woods, but I still had mouse remnants, chewed up stuff in this. So that this morning it was just blitz the cupboard, get it clean. And I thought, this is a stupid thing to do before I'm seeing Toby, because it's going to take longer than I think it's going to take.